The following program is a UWTV classic.
From the University of Washington in Seattle, Upon Reflection.
Hello and welcome to Upon Reflection. I'm Marcia Alvar. With a sneer and a cigarette, writer Fran Lebowitz surveys the world. Much of what she sees, she does not like. Her observations and opinions have been published in magazines and collected in two books, Metropolitan Life and Social Studies, which in turn have been collected again into a new book called The Fran Lebowitz Reader. Like many writers, writing is not easy for her. She once asked, if you could be anything else, why would you be a writer? Her newest work is a book for children called Mr. Chaz and Lisa Sue Meet the Pandas. Welcome to Upon Reflection.
Thank you.
Why this book?
You mean a children's book?
Yeah.
I always wanted to write one, and I first time I mentioned it to an editor was after my first book, Metropolitan Life, came out, which was in 1978. And I said, well, now I'd like to write a children's book. And he said, all writers who have successful first books want to write a children's book because they're scared to write a real book. So since I was scared, but I mean, writing is terrifying, I thought that maybe it was true, and I was effectively discouraged, although I never agreed that it wasn't a real book. So just a brief, 16 years later, I got around to doing it.
Was the slice of the publishing world that you worked with doing this book different than the publishing world you dealt with before?
Oh, it's an entirely different business. I mean, it's run that way, in my opinion. If they let me revamp it, I don't think it should be, but no one knows anyone. I mean, within the Random House building, which is a giant company that owns many publishers, no one from the trade side, the adult side, knows anyone in children's book publishing, and pretty much vice versa. And they're really run differently. It's very, very different.
I've heard you say there's a kind of snobbery in children's publishing.
There's snobbery on both sides. There is, on the adult side, there is just a total kind of contempt for children's books. And they know nothing about them. They just, think of them as something having nothing to do with book publishing. On the children's side, not so much in publishing, but in things ancillary to publishing. But there is a tremendous resentment of writers who are not children's book writers, primarily writing a children's book. I've managed to finally get myself in a situation where everybody hates me. It used to be like one side would like me, one side. Now, pretty much everyone dislikes
Clean
me.
slate.
Everyone is angry.
This book came at the end of a quite lengthy period of time where you didn't write at all.
Very lengthy.
Was this sort of like the cork that came out of the bottle?
No. This is just what I finished first. I had about 10-year long period where I couldn't work. I couldn't write. And when I finally got over that, I started working on this novel that I've been supposed to have been writing since the late 19th century. And once I was able to write so much that I was able to write this extra thing. This extra thing, which I wrote for extra credit.
A lanyap.
Yes, and but which in fact has caused me extra criticism. It's short, so I finished it, and I published it.
You said that you have very little recollection of even writing this book.
Well, in the sense that, normally I can remember every painful second.
Because there's suffering involved.
Yeah, there's a lot of torment for me involved in writing. This I actually enjoyed. It was a pleasure to write. It's been fairly tormenting to publish, but it was a pleasure to write. I enjoyed it. And I also wrote it after the initial few pages. What I started doing is when I would be working on my novel and I would get stuck, something that would occur, hourly. Instead of doing what I had always done, which was kind of instantly retire to the sofa with someone else's book, I would think, well, I'll work on this, and at least I'll be writing, and I'll stay at the desk, which is good, because if I get away from the desk, it could be years till I can get back to it. And so I wrote it over a period of time. I don't actually know how long it took me to write, because I had no contract, no deadline, no one asking for it. In fact, people all around me discouraging me from doing it. And so that I just wrote it along until one day I noticed I had finished it. It was not at all it wasn't like an adult writing experience, but it was very much like the experience I had with writing when I was a child. which is that I became a writer because when I was a child, I loved to write.
And it was, you said, your most productive period when you were a child.
Oh, are you kidding? If I was productive at the rate now that I was as a child, I would have that swell house in Italy.
What stopped you? I mean, you said that it was almost the first time you got paid to do something that writing got to be really difficult.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, the very first magazine, you know, what we used to call underground newspaper, writing assignment for which I was paid $15. The very second I got that, I just got frozen, you know. I mean, not totally, so I was able to eke a few things out over the years, but, and it wasn't until very recently when I started really being able to work again, and all these years, would have been many years since then, all these years I always said and believed, I hate to write. And when I really started working on this book, I realized, no, I hate to work.
Breakthrough.
You know, I hate to work. I am incredibly slothful. I am the laziest person in America. And so that once writing became work, I started to resist it because I have this kind of awful teenage resistance to authority that is so strong, I even resist my own authority. So even when I'm in charge and I'm saying, go to the desk, write, the other person beside me, which is 15 years old, is saying, make me. You know, so that this revelation happened to me. I don't know how useful it'll be. Most revelations are really not very practical.
As legend has it, you were tossed out of school, out of high school, and went to New York. The odds against becoming the kind of success you've become would seem to be fairly long for anyone who went to New York under those circumstances. How did you survive? What did you do when you got to New York?
Well, when I first got thrown out of high school, I was sent to live with my mother's sister and her husband and children, and I lived there in Poughkeepsie. So you can see why it was a punishment. I lived there until I turned 18, and then I moved to New York. Well, it never seemed very daunting to me. I mean, because I was 18. The upside, well, there are many upsides to being 18. First of all, you look 18. But one of the other upsides of it is that at least I didn't think that I couldn't do things, you know. And that's kind of remarkable considering the fact of what a failure I was, you know, in school, which was my only profession before that. You know, I mean, you can't be a bigger academic failure than to be thrown out of high school your senior year. So it wasn't like I had a lifetime of success behind me that was buoying me up. But I just didn't think about it. I went to New York to be a writer, and that was it.
One of the first things that you wrote was a column for Interview magazine, and then after doing that for a time, what was I Would Cover the Waterfront was the name of the...
No, my first column I had for Interview was called The Best of the Worst, and it was a movie review column. But I only reviewed, well, not even B movies, like L movies maybe. Most of these
What's
movies...
What's an L movie?
That's, you know, well, as we
Track
go down...
of the Moonbeams.
As we go down the alphabet, you know. I would say now, in my opinion, most movies are L movies. But these movies that I reviewed almost never even opened in New York. They were mostly movies made for drive-ins. They were mostly movies made, there were still drive-ins then. Probably now, kids watching will say, what's a drive-in? They'll think most movies made for McDonald's? No. The drive-in movie theaters. And mostly made by a company called American International Pictures, with specialized AIP in this certain sort of movie, which I was in love with. And they screened them in New York for distributors, and so I would go and watch the screenings. You're right. I did this column for a couple of years, and then I started doing I Cover the Waterfront, which was more Catholic. I wrote about everything, not just movies.
The job after that was with Mademoiselle, right? And it seems like kind of a hop there from Andy Warhol's shop and his magazine to Mademoiselle.
Now, the Mademoiselle column I did concurrently with the Interview column.
Schizophrenic.
I did them both at once. Well, I mean, I only went to Mademoiselle once. When I first got the job, I went up there to bring my column, and apparently they considered me to be an unhealthy influence on the Mademoiselle staff members, and so I was told, don't come anymore. When you finish your column, we'll send a messenger for it. The messenger will come, and when we send you a check, a messenger will come with a check. So I kind of got thrown out of Mademoiselle in the same way I got thrown out of high school, but they let me still write my column.
But this sounds like design. This sounds perfect for you to not
Yeah,
have
it turned
to
out to be. I wasn't dying to go up to Mademoiselle. I mean, I haven't seen it many years, but in fact, I never read it when I was the age you were supposed to be, a teenager, to read it. And I did read it while I worked there. But when I worked there, it did seem to me that every issue was the ski issue. Every issue had the same perky blonde girl on the cover with a ski cap, and Yes, it certainly was in Congress. That was where I first got my first real taste of hate mail. That's probably my first inkling that I wasn't going to be able to run for public office in this country.
You said you've kind of rounded out the universality of being hated by doing this children's book. What new and awful things have people come to say about you?
Oh, every possible thing. I mean, the media in this country, as you may have noticed, has become quite vicious. And I must say that in general, the media approaches artists and writers and entertainers with the sort of fury that should be directed at politicians. Say that someone has written the worst book ever written. Is that a crime? I mean, I don't think that's a crime.
Did you really hurt anyone?
Yes. I mean, is that the worst problem in this country? Is that there's a bad book of short stories out? And it's only their opinion that it's a bad book of short stories. This attitude toward, not just artists, but entertainers, singers, whatever. This is the level of rage, and this is the sort of focus that should be directed at people like Al D'Amato. Not people like who are writers. So, yeah, I've got it from both sides. The children's book world, I think, is pretty irritated that I think they consider me an interloper. I get a lot of criticism just for my way of life, especially in regard to writing children's books. But I get that also from the book side. Let's put it this way: I'm not going to win any prizes. Prizes where people vote on giving them.
You said your way of life. What do you mean by that?
I mean, because I go to parties and things. This is not allowed. I mean, it's allowed, but you get points off. Who's ever keeping score for like what is a real writer? A real writer doesn't go to a fashion show. A real writer doesn't. I'm a lounge lizard. I've been hanging out. I've been hanging out my whole life. Well, it's all right to hang out, but I don't hang out with the right people. I don't hang out with I don't hang out at the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, and so that contingent. Basically, I just don't feel like I could be President Student Council this year.
Now, in fairness to some of the critics, couldn't they be looking back on some of the things you've said about children which really have been less than kind?
The only things I ever wrote about children was, in a direct way like that, was I wrote a piece that was in Metropolitan Life called Children Pro or Con. All anyone remembers is con. It's half things that are favorable toward children, half things that are not. No one remembers the other stuff. I think more people think I don't like children, not because of anything I've ever said or written, but because anyone's public image is really a cartoon. The public or the media picks out 2 or 3 things, and then they make a character out of that person. And you add to that. I mean you, one, myself. That character and that image is exploited by oneself and by the media for personal gain. And then it comes back at you, because the fact is that, for instance, when my first book came out, I was frequently compared by reviewers to W.C. Fields. Now, W.C. Fields was not a writer, and I was a 27-year-old girl at the time. I was flattered. I love W.C. Fields. I just didn't see what I had to do with him. Also because I really don't like animals. I don't like dogs. So that because I don't like dogs, everyone thinks I don't like children. Now, who's the worst person? The person who does not make the distinction between dogs or children, which seems to be everyone else, or me?
Okay, there's just one thing that you did say about children that I wanted to ask you about, and that was you were asked if you were interested in children, and you said you weren't interested in children, and you couldn't see why, unless someone had an erotic interest in them, that they'd have interest in children at all.
I don't remember. Was this?
It was at the Paris Review. It was published last summer.
And an interest in having children?
No, and you had no interest in children.
No. I said I had no interest in young people. He meant people in their 20s.
Ah.
He said, like, are you interested in what they call Generation X? Oh, no, that wasn't children at all. I have no interest in, he said, do you have friends who are young? Are you interested in the writing of young writers? He means very young writers in their 20s, but not 6-year-olds. Do you have interest in young people or these particular novels or books, And I said, no, I am not interested in young people, by which I meant people that age. And I don't know why people are interested in them specifically. You might meet some that are interesting, but as a group, why would someone, I'm 44, do I expect to meet a 22-year-old who knows more things than I do? No. I would like to meet like a 64-year-old who, I like to have conversations up not down. So that, I didn't say neurotic, I said erotic.
Erotic.
Oh yes, I
right.
thought you said neurotic. Well, they could be the same thing. So that, of course, 22-year-olds...
This section of the interview came out quite differently, which I guess illustrates wonderfully why you've refused to be edited over the years.
I think that if you reread it, you would find that it's clearer than that. I'm not sure that this case, but 22-year-olds are cuter than 44-year-olds, no question. They're better looking. And I was saying that that would be a logical interest, but to be particularly interested in the writings of 22-year-olds, I just think it's, there's always been the idea, it's not new, that writing that is fashionable is writing that appeals to people of that age. And that has pretty much been the case. And I just said that I personally, when I give readings, and many people that age come, I'm always surprised to see them. I have certainly done anything to curry their favor. And I don't even know why they come, because I think they see you on TV or something like that.
You said at TV you were on a panel of famous people once in New York that included Ivana Trump and Norman Mailer, among others. You said TV celebrity, TV fame is absolutely the worst kind.
Yes, this was a panel organized by Harry Evans, who's the head of Random House, to promote a book by a man named Clive James, who's an English, well, has a TV show in England.
TV series on Fame.
Right, and he's a writer. And yes, it was a very, I don't remember everyone who was on the panel, but it was quite a mixed group. You're right, it was Ivana Trump and Norman Mailer and me and Anna Wintour, who's the editor of Vogue, and one or two other people. And there was an audience. It was in a theater. It was at I think it was the Public Theater. Yes, but by which I meant it's the most fame you can have in this country, the highest level of fame, of being recognized, and that I thought it was a terrible amount of fame, too much. People who are on television routinely are recognized by everyone. Every single person that you will see in the street.
Whether you want them to or not.
Right, but I guess they do. I said I personally found that to be too much fame. That I thought that fame is something very sought after in this culture, like money. Now, I don't believe there's such a thing as too much money, but there is such a thing as too much fame. And I think that writers have the perfect amount of fame. You have just enough to get a good table in a restaurant, but not so much that people come over and annoy you while you're eating. But if you're on television, I know people who are on television. They can't walk down the street. They can't. People will come up constantly. Also, it's not just the number of people that recognize you. It's the way in which you are perceived if you're on television, because television is a very intimate media. It's in their house. They think they know them. You know, even though a TV personality will be approached much more familiarly than a big movie star, because the TV personality, they think, well, hi, it's you. You see me in my underwear, you see me, you're in the house. Like, look at how everyone talks about Oprah Winfrey. Oprah, hi, come over to eat. Oprah, want to come over to my house for dinner? They think that Oprah's like their next door neighbor. They don't think that of Al Pacino. They know because they see him at a distance. It's different.
TV is also now a huge part of childhood. And do you think childhood has changed because of that?
I think that people's childhoods, oh yes, because for two things mainly that changed childhood: constant, endless television. Not television the way television was when I was a child, which was as a form of entertainment. You watched a television show.
Pinky Lee.
Pinky Lee. I forgot about Pinky.
Oh ho hee.
Pinky Lee. I mean, you watched a TV show the same way as which you saw a movie. It was a finite amount of time. You sat there, you watched a show, you shut the TV off, the show was over. Television is not about watching shows anymore. Television is actually now, it's like that, the alien. Television is in everyone's head. It's 24 hours a day. People don't make a distinction between their lives and what they see on TV. People talk about what's on television, and people's lives and people themselves have been turned inside out, so that the notion of private life, by which I mean real life, doesn't exist anymore. So naturally, children will be the most susceptible to this, because they're completely unformed. They have no formed consciousness or sensibility. So that is the most extreme thing. Also, children have no parents now. The combination of no parents and television is pretty disastrous. We cannot be that surprised to see that they're shooting each other or us. It's a recipe for disaster.
You said childhood is unhappier, and one of the things that I love that you said about television was that So it's something you do as an adult when you're depressed. I mean, you watch television,
Yeah.
and it's like giving children a martini.
Worse. A martini at least has a lot of aesthetic quality to it, you know, much worse. I mean, I know that I'm sure that most people that you know, they'll say, you know, oh, I'm so depressed. I've been just sitting in front of the TV set. Or, you know, people when they get divorced, they tell you, I'm sitting in front of the TV set, or they lose their job. That is what they do when they're really downhearted and depressed. That we allow children to spend so much time doing something that adults do when they're depressed is just unimaginable. Yes, and if you would suggest that another thing adults do, as I said, was they drink. No, I wouldn't say no one would think of giving a child a martini, but fewer people think of it than of letting their kids sit in front of the TV. It is also, there's some relationship between depression and television.
Physiological,
yes,
real.
Yes, yeah, some scientific connection, I think, between the two. This is about as much effort as you can muster when you're depressed. That's it. And what you're doing, it's like letting a lab animal like press a thing to get heroin or to get anything that's numbing. And it's the numbing quality that we look for in television when we're depressed. We seek it out. It's one thing for an adult, who's in some sort of personal anguish, to seek out the numbing quality of television. It's another thing to allow children to be numbed by it.
Well, as a child, you were a voracious reader. You continue to be. Do you think kids come to language the same way that you did or I did as children?
No, not most. I'm sure there are some lucky children who do. First of all, if you can get them away from the television set. Second of all, with children spending a lot of time away from their parents now, because their parents aren't, let's face it, forget parents, they're mothers. We have to say this. People are always saying single parent families, like there's a lot of single father families. I mean, they're mothers. When I was a child in the 50s, when I was born in 1950, everyone's mother was home all the time. Everyone that I knew. I know there were women who worked. They were not the majority, and certainly in the middle class it was very, very unusual. I didn't even know anyone whose mother worked when I was a child. So your mother was home all day. Your mother talked to you. Your mother was going crazy. She had no one else to talk to. This type of life, by the way, giving a child that type of childhood means the total sacrifice of the mother's life. So I'm not berating women for not doing it. I'm just saying that when mothers stay home all the time, children have an adult to talk to who actually is interested in them. At least as their child. There's no way you can pay someone to love you. People take care of their children. Some might be very nice. They might in fact love the children, but they're not the mother. So, and they also may often not even have English as a first language. And so the ability of children to learn language is very diminished by this. Also, there's TV, there's a lot of distractions that adults don't read as much. Adults also don't talk to each other as much.
There also seem to be different expectations for children now. And I was struck by something that you said about you. I also did the same thing. I had piano lessons when I was a kid. But as you said, your parents didn't expect you to be Glenn Gould when you grew up. And now it seems that when children get the kind of thing that our parents gave to us because for some reason they thought it would be good for us to have it, to be kind of a cultivated person, now the expectations of what these children are to do with that seem to be much higher.
Well, probably in the upper middle class that would probably be true. But I was a middle class kid, and kids took piano lessons. You took ballet lessons. Not every kid. And maybe it was more common among Jewish children, but a lot of people I know did. You took piano lessons, ballet lessons, those type of lessons, because there was this idea that you should be a kind of a cultivated person. You should have some familiarity with these things. You should know something about music. You should know something about dance. You should read. You should mainly, probably, as far as Jews were concerned, Eastern European Jews were mostly not allowed to do any of these things in their original countries. The Jews who did have access to these things were mostly German Jews, and the Eastern European Jews aped the German Jews, and the German Jews, of course, wanting desperately to be Gentiles. But and that's that comes from the German notion of high culture, but it's no one I know became a pianist. No, I didn't even become a competent child pianist. I was, in addition to being a bad piano player, I was also a remarkably poor cello player. I was not a good cellist either. I could have not mastered almost any instrument given to me. I was also very bad at ballet lessons. None of these things took. I wasn't good at any of them. No, my parents would have been thrilled had I been. I don't mean to say that had I been good at it, there would definitely been a push behind me. But there wasn't any expectation of it. I not come from a talented family. And now I think parents who give their children certain kind of lessons, although I seem to see more tennis lessons being given than piano lessons. I'm sure that there is an extreme desire, and I can see in certain cases that this leads to some sort of profession. Things now, athletics, for instance, for girls didn't exist. Now I hear a lot of women my age complain, oh, they really wanted to play. I was thrilled. For me,
sports have never been really big for you.
The upside of being a girl is you didn't have to play football. We have plenty of problems, but to me, if on top of the other miseries of childhood, like long division, had been added good at sports, I really would have had a miserable time. Now there's a big emphasis on sports in this country in general that I think is exceptionally harmful, and a big emphasis on children doing well to the point of actually earning a living as an athlete. This is a bizarre notion, and I think what people seem not to realize, because everyone has access to sports equipment. Every child has a ball, every town has a little league, every school has a team. The level of talent that you need to be a professional athlete is very, very rare. It is as rare.
You have a better chance of being Glenn Gould.
Well, no, you have an equal chance. See, that's what I'm saying. To be Michael Jordan, you have an equal chance as you have of being Glenn Gould, or of being, Albert Einstein or Flaubert, and to have a whole nation of people trying to make their children do this thing that it's ridiculous.
We're almost out of time. I wanted to ask you how the novel's coming along.
Well, it is at least coming along, whereas previous to this it was really just sitting there for many, many years. I guess I had the expectation that it would write itself. It did not do this. Very unruly book. It now is coming along, and although I discovered when I actually started writing what a slow writer I am, there is some possibility, although I wouldn't bet any money on it, that it could be finished within a year, if I have a good year.
Is there anything worse than writing? Anything harder than writing?
Not writing.
Not writing. What did you do all that time when you weren't writing?
I sulked. I was a full-time sulker. I mean, you mean for money?
No, just what did you do for morning to night to morning to night?
I sulked. Listen, not writing is very time-consuming.
So it almost got to be more work not writing than to write.
It definitely was. It was harder, psychically, and psychologically. It was much harder.
Mr. Chas and Lisa Sumi, The Pandas is your newest book. It's illustrated by Michael Grace. What were you like to work with on that book?
What was I like? Well, I'm sure he's had better working experiences. I'm sure he's had less demanding clients, especially ones, we had, he's an old friend of mine, and I think we had a certain number of tiffs, but we've made up. I think he did a wonderful job. The tiffs were caused by me saying, didn't you read the book? She's supposed to be taller than he is. Oh no, I didn't mean that kind of building. The building was the thing that got him most angry, because he was willing to say he forgot the girl was taller, but when I said, no, that's not the building I mean, he felt that as when it came to buildings, he should be the standard by which this was judged. And he said, he mentioned he was an architect. He said, in architecture, I said, but Michael, this isn't architecture. This isn't a building. It's a picture of a building. No one's ever going to build this.
I'm sure they were great arguments. I want to thank you, Fran Lebowitz, for being a guest. Come again.
To see more UWTV classics, visit uwtv.org/classics.